And I'll just give you one more quotation from Rumuz Beykhudi, where basically Iqbal says, migration, I'm translating from the Persian, migration is the law of the life of the Muslim. It is the baggage, and the word he uses here is asbab. It is the baggage of the stability of the Muslim. And then he goes on to say, its meaning is to fly from shallow waters, to abandon the dew in order to subdue the ocean, go beyond the single rose, the entire garden is your purpose. So what we could say here then is that this inner transformation caused by travel, this traveling identity, opens up imaginative vistas of space. So it opens up an imagination of new spaces that are available for Muslims, which actually counteracts the colonization of territories by Europe and the circumscription, the containment of space, the geographical containment of space by European expansion. So what's important here is, through his poetry, he's dramatizing both inner transformation and how that inner transformation opens up a new imagination of space, which has to counteract the circumscription, the command of space by European colonialism. So in his landscape, in Iqbal's landscape, migrancy and vistas of space, the imagination of new forms of space, both internal space and external space, exist in mutually reinforcing relationships. And what's important here is, therefore, that travel for Iqbal, hijrat, travel, opens up the ability to visualize different representations of space that impact on one's self-esteem. So what's important here is the impact on one's self-esteem. And there are a few other things that we could say here. So you can see how travel becomes important for Khudi. There are a few other things we can say here. Is that paradoxically then, being rooted in travel, so paradoxically being rooted in travel is crucial to his construction of Islam. So there's a kind of paradoxical notion of rootedness. But moreover, what's important for Iqbal is that mobility in travel means you have to travel lightly. You can't be weighed down by asbab, by baggage, by material goods. And that link between the readiness to travel lightly, not being weighed down by material goods, by asbab, and the possible regeneration of Islam is represented in Jawab-e-Shikwa, the answer to complaint, where God is represented as saying, your caravan will never be laid waste, viran, if you have no baggage apart, and the word here he uses is saman, if you have no baggage apart from the caravan bell. So it's as though your baggage has to be the caravan bell. Your baggage is travel itself. Okay, that's the only baggage you carry with it. Travel itself. So what's important here, and there are many other kind of images of this in his poetry, which I won't kind of list for you. So the important point here is that inner transformation that results from, and that is both the cause and the result of travel, is also tied to a notion of travel where the success of travel is not measured by asbab or saman, not by the goods, the material goods that you acquire in the course of travel, but in terms of the kind of self that you become in the process of travel. Okay, so there's a kind of, if you like, validation of the spiritual aspects of travel, if you like, the anti-material aspects of travel. The other important thing about travel here, I think, is that it's important to remember how within the context of the time, for Iqbal, Khudi becomes a form of transgressive travel. So it becomes a form of transgressive travel, and we have to, and in my book I talk at length about what's transgressive about Khudi. It has to be seen within the dominant terms of Islamic culture at the time, and also in terms of European colonialism. So in fact, there are two contexts against which Iqbal is arguing. One is Islamic culture as dominated by Sufism at the time, so if you like, a context internal to Islam. And the other is the external context of European colonialism, which kind of maps onto the Sufi context. And here, what I try and do in my book is to show that the Javed Nama is important because it's actually a kind of travelogue where travel becomes not a question of the physical body, but a journey within an inner realm of the individual's self. So travel becomes a form of introspection within an inner realm. And so, if you like, travel is about opening up interiority, the internal landscape of selfhood. It's about opening up interiority, the internal landscape of selfhood, and I'll come back to why that's important. And there are a number of ways in which, in the Javed Nama, if you read it, that becomes clear. First of all, the poet imagines the entire universe to be traveling. So what's interesting is that here in this poem, the motif of travel is expanded to think about the universe as a whole, in terms of a dynamic process of travel. The second is how the poet himself is named after movement or motion, because he calls himself Zinda Rud, or living stream. So he imagines himself to be a river in flow. And there are other examples of this reference to rivers in the poem, as well as into other poems like Kanare Ravi, which I'll come back to. And it's quite important to think about how in Iqbal's aesthetic landscape, rivers in motion are a recurring image in relation to travel, because they kind of reinforce the sense of the sense the poet himself has that he's on an unceasing journey. And the two poems that are really interesting there are Taranai Mili and Taranai Hindi, where rivers play an important part in the imaginative landscape of the poem. So the point is that Iqbal focuses on rivers as he focuses on travel in order to, if you like, unfreeze a Muslim landscape, to mobilize a Muslim landscape, to make landscape, if you like, a process in becoming rather than a frozen map, a map frozen by European colonialism and Islamic culture. So interestingly, if you like, perpetual travel in the Javed Nama, ceaseless travel, becomes a necessary metaphysical condition and a necessary ontological condition for being human. And in fact, death is defined by Al-Halaj in Javed Nama as the opposite of travel. So this death is a kind of, is when you cease to travel. So Al-Halaj is cited as saying the paradise of free men, Azad Gan, is eternal voyaging. So eternal voyaging is what constitutes the paradise of free men, Jannate Azad Gan. So there's a sense in which, therefore, for Iqbal, as he says in another couplet in the Javed Nama, the soul dies by being at rest. It is alive with perpetual flight, parvaze madam. It is alive with perpetual flight. So there's also, if you like, a redefinition of what death means. So you could be physically alive, but if you like, internally dead if you cease to travel. Okay, so that's the you know. So I'm losing my thread here. It's the excitement. But anyway, that's the point of death, I think, in the poem.